My girlfriend and I have been together for about a year. Most everything is great except one thing. If I tell her I'm sick / not feeling well / hurt, she refuses to believe me. If I have a cold, she tells me I'm faking it until it goes away and then says, "See, you are fine." I'm rarely sick, so it's never been a major issue. But she has zero sympathy when I'm sick. She grew up with hypochondriac parents who were always sick with something, often self-diagnosing themselves with fatal maladies. She has limited contact with them, and the time I met them, I was told by them that they didn't have long left to live. I get it, growing up in that household must have been awful. But what happened on Sunday just sent me over the edge. Girlfriend and my sister wanted to check out this event and we were all supposed to go. I woke up with excruciating back pain and could barely breathe. Girlfriend got so mad at me for ruining this that she wouldn't speak to me. As she was about to leave, I asked her not to leave because I thought something was wrong. She said no and left. I threw up in my bed and eventually called my parents. I was too embarrassed to call 911. And my mother and brother hauled me to the hospital. I was whisked back and after 20 minutes I was diagnosed with kidney stones. Fentanyl and gravel, and I had a CT scan and then went for a procedure to bust the kidney stones. 5 hours later and I was laying on my parents' sofa in a haze. I have never, and hope to never, feel pain like that again in my life. I was sure I was going to die. The attending in the told me it's worse than childbirth and that they've had it before, too. I didn't text my girlfriend throughout because I really didn't have the strength or foresight. I was drugged up and uncomfortable. My sister found out that I had been in the emergency room and soon after my girlfriend called me. She was pissed off I didn't call her. Then I reminded her that I begged her not to leave as I thought something was wrong. She got quiet and eked out an apology. I got furious and said something rather nasty things, unsavory things. In fairness, I was on dope, still sore, peeing blood and felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Standing was incredibly painful. I needed to take 2 days off of work and school. I rested in bed and the only thing you can think is the person who should have been there didn't even believe me. She's texted me this week a formal apology and wants one in return for saying nasty things to her. I've been avoiding her texts / calls. I felt like shit this week and picked something up in the So I laid low, took a few days off work and relaxed. She wants to meet tonight and talk about everything, but I'm still so mad I don't know if I should hold off seeing her. Is this as big a transgression as I feel like it is? Am I blowing this out of proportion because I felt so shitty? I just am so annoyed and angry. Girlfriend didn't believe me something was wrong and I wound up in the with kidney stones and needed a procedure. She was mad that I didn't call her, I was too doped up, and then when I blew up at her she felt bad. I'm still mad at her. I've been with my wife for 2 years. She has a 21-year-old son. I have a 14-year-old daughter from my previous marriage. My late wife passed away in 2014. She left a few things for our daughter, including a gold jewelry set. Her mom was devastated she didn't get to gift the set to our daughter on her wedding day. I keep it in my closet since it's expensive and my daughter is too young to have it. I'll hopefully gift it to her on her wedding. We were sitting in the kitchen when my stepson was hesitant to ask me something. We're in good terms but have our fair share of arguments. He said his fiancée was taking something from his mother's and my closet, saw the jewelry set and liked it very much. He asked if he could borrow it so his fiancée can wear it at her cousin's wedding. I found this unacceptable. I told him his fiancée had no business being in the bedroom and that the jewelry isn't mine. It's for my daughter. He asked me if my daughter will agree to let him borrow it if he talked to her. I told him not to even talk about it again. He got all pissed and said things I do not remember. When he and his fiancée were at the wedding, I discovered that the jewelry set was gone. I told my wife and we looked all over the house. I called my stepson to tell him about calling the police because I really thought someone stole the set. He said there was no need, that he borrowed it and will return it after they get back from the wedding. I yelled at him and told him to come back with it right then. I kept calling him till 12 a.m. when he told me to stop calling and that he'd bring it in the morning. I couldn't sleep that night. I felt terrible. In the morning he showed up at 10 a.m. He didn't bring it and started stalling, saying he forgot he'd bring it the next day. At this point it was clear he gifted it to his fiancée and was stalling. I got so mad I told him I will be pressing charges if he doesn't return the set today. We got into an argument. My wife said his fiancée was the one who wanted the jewelry set. But he was the one who took it, and it's not even mine, it's my daughter's, which made it worse. Because I'm responsible for whatever happens to it. His grandparents berated me after I told them this and got mad and defended him when I said that I will be pressing charges. He stole and needed to be responsible for his actions. He didn't respond to my final calls, so now I've given him one last chance, and it's over. I pressed charges today. They're saying calling the police was extreme and cruel. They're all convincing me to back down. He was replying to me sarcastically when I said I'd get the authorities involved, and he didn't take me seriously. His mom said she tried to talk to him, but I had enough of him stalling, hoping I'll just let it go, so he can make his fiancée happy. I feel like an irresponsible idiot. I can't even look at my daughter without feeling frustrated and infuriated. I'm hurt, but what's worse is that this is my daughter's property that I couldn't take care of. My wife allows them into the room, although I told her not to several times. They're not kids, and there should be some boundaries. My cousin Amy has twins and has a nasty habit of dumping them onto relatives to babysit for the entire day without any warning or regard for their time. I have a very strained relationship with her, but because my mom's side of the family demands that we all remain close-knit, so I have no choice to tolerate her. When she initially gave birth to them, she teased me that I'll have to take on babysitting duty from now on. I'm no good with kids, so I remarked to her that if I ever have them, I'll train them, not babysit. She brushed me off. The kids now are hella destructive and loud, pulling out stuffing inside furniture, holes inside walls, smashing anything glass and porcelain, screaming louder than a fire alarm. You name it. When it was my first turn to deal with them, I immediately walked with them to the store and grabbed the biggest bag of M&Ms I could find and trained them so that every time they follow my orders and behave, they get one. If they misbehave, I get one. Soon enough, every time the kids were dumped on me, they went with my guidelines and behaved. Whenever I say sit, they sit at the table. When I say stay, they don't leave that spot, etc. 2 days ago there was a party planned with the whole extended family. I know, pandemic. Didn't want to, but mom insisted, and I grabbed the M&Ms since the twins were there. Arrived, twins were being so destructive, an entire tray of food was spilled. That all the adults had enough and yelled at Amy to control them. She vomited the same excuse of them just being kids and they'll grow out of it eventually. I shouted the twins' names and shook my M&Ms bag. They came running over to me and I popped 6 pieces into my mouth for their misbehavior. I told them to go clean up the mess or no candy all night. They do so. Halfway through the party, every time something similar came up or they just weren't behaving, I was the one able to calm them down. When Amy saw what I was doing, she got angry and started yelling at me about how her children aren't animals and that I shouldn't be giving them so much candy anyway. I told her that I'm their aunt, not their parent. Why am I the one disciplining them? Isn't that her job? She screamed the same argument at me, and since she's their mother, to stop giving them candy. One of the twins overheard and went apes hit. Dashed straight into the kitchen and started shattering anything they can get his hands on, shouting over and over that he wants candy. His twin joined him soon after. I repeated that she's their mother, and just sat in the living room watching it all unfold. At the end, Amy blamed me for them turning out this way. The other relatives she dumped them on, a majority, disagreed, but when I told a friend about the situation, he told me that the training I did can really up the kids mentally later in life. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask, which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with. but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander when it comes to. This has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated.